Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And what an exciting story this is tonight, and we're on the final part of it, so I'm so glad you've joined me. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with part 4 of our story tonight. That night, while Archie's 2 nephews were sleeping peacefully in the treehouse, he had faithfully made hourly trips to the woodgrove. It hadn't been an easy or effortless endeavour, not like walking around a warehouse at night, for the dark night was pretentiously foreboding, and the labyrinth of rocky paths through the trees, rising up the high elevation, were laboriously challenging to navigate at the best of times. But none of this mattered to Uncle Archie. He had a satisfied smile on his face that simply could not be wiped away, because his 2 nephews were getting their wishes granted tonight and sleeping in the treehouse. In the morning they'd lightly wake up on top of the tree, with the sun rising over the horizon, in a fetching escarpment of pretty colours, as if it had been spray-painted by a graffiti artist, in sweeping splashes of oranges and pinks. "Oh, to be a child again," he thought to himself. "I can imagine how much fun the children are having in the treehouse tonight." When the clock on Archie's nightstand had reached the witching hour, Archie climbed out of his bed yet again. The alarm on his cell phone had sounded, so he needed to resume his walk through the woods. He was wearing his outdoor clothes, so all he needed to do was to slip on his walking boots and then get out of the house, and he did none of this begrudgingly, for his good mood refused to dissipate, despite the regular inconvenience of having to get up over and over again. Archie noticed his trip down the rugged pathways through the trees had become a lot more uncomfortable this time. He kept getting tripped up by loose stones and jutting rocks that protruded obtrusively through the ground, like the gnashes of a fearsome shark, along with the knotted tentacles of a root system from some of the old growth trees that had for some reason he had failed to see. He realized he was getting very tired. His eyelids were growing significantly heavier, but he had to fight this foggy feeling off. He couldn't break his word to Gretchen. He was not going to sleep on the job, even though he knew perfectly well no harm would come to his 2 nephews. That treehouse was extremely safe and secure, but a promise was a promise as far as Archie was concerned, and he was a man of great integrity, whose word was his bond. As Archie trekked up the high mountainous incline through the trees, a peppering of pearly moonlight magnanimously cast its soft illumination over the forest floor. He noticed the temperature had dipped significantly, and the icy coolness seemed to wrestle with his clothes and slip through his underlying garments, rather like an icy cold pair of witch's hands. "Good Lord, it's cold in here," he thought, his teeth beginning to rattle. As Archie was making his way to the treehouse, he stopped short dead in his tracks, for he could hear a strange voice. "Help me! Please help me!" "Good Lord," thought Archie. "What the hell is that?" Archie quickly increased his walking pace, with a measure of urgency, and hastily moved towards the voice. "Please God, don't let the kids be in trouble tonight," he thought. "I'll never hear the end of it from Gretchen. What if one of the kids has gone sleepwalking during the night, and God forbidden fallen out of the tree, and injured himself severely, broken a leg perhaps, or worse?" Such a discombobulating thought had never even crossed his mind or occurred to him, and the horror of such a nauseating idea had filled him with impending dread. But then again, if the boys had locked the treehouse from the inside, someone sleepwalking would not be able to get out of a locked door, he reasoned with himself very sensibly. He heard the strange voice again. "Please help me! Help! Help! I'm in trouble!" It was then, as Archie was getting closer to the voice, he realized that the help me cries did not come from his nephews. So who on earth was in trouble, he wondered. It was in this sobering, rather disquieting moment that Archie became profoundly aware that there was an airy darkness that had descended across the woodgrove, like a thick, foggy black carpet, It was almost like walking from a previously warm, rather pleasant room with a soft, ethereal light into something infinitely more sinister, menacing even. Everything in the woodgrove had gone disturbingly quiet, and Archie realised that even the pleasant trills of the crickets and frogs had all but vanished. And he knew that that was not an auspicious omen. Everyone knew you needed to pay attention when the woodgrove became quiet and still. Once again Archie could hear the voice crying out, "Help me, please! Help me!" And there was something very wrong with that Machiavellian voice, as if it altogether could not be trusted. Archie's instincts were in overdrive, and even the hair on the back of his head began to bristle and prickle like static electricity. He could tell something was very wrong. His throat had become dry and parched like a riverbed. He realised the voice was very close to where the treehouse was. Were the children in danger, he wondered. He was now extremely glad he had brought a rifle along with him. Sometimes his sister Gretchen could be quite a wizened soul. He didn't give her enough credit for being so astute. Maybe Gretchen wasn't paranoid after all, he thought, wishing suddenly with all his heart that his nephews were safely tucked away in their beds at home, and not lying together in the treehouse, for whatever was crying up to them for help was trying to get their attention. Archie was now only feet away from the treehouse, and he heard the voice again very clearly. He gingerly switched his torch off in order not to draw any attention to himself. It was rather fortunate that large openings in the forest canopy above his head were made all the bigger by the fact that most trees in the grove at this time of the year had sprouted brand new but tiny leaves that were still so small, so that the pearly light of the moon could drop down clearly onto the forest floor. And in that moment it would seem that the line between fiction and reality became very distorted for Uncle Archie. Surely what he was seeing could not be real. He had to be having a nightmare. This just could not be happening. For standing there at the bottom of the tree, calling up to his two nephews, was the most hideous, grotesque thing he'd ever seen in his entire life. And the only thought that rattled around in his head, rather like a loose ping-pong ball, was, what the hell is that? He could see this thing was humanoid in shape, long, thin, slightly disfigured, with spindly legs and arms which appeared to have 3 long thin fingers and 3 long toes. It was covered in grey skin that was wrinkly all over the face, that was shaped rather like a walnut. At this point Uncle Archie's reflex action was to shoot at this thing, so he fired some shots, but it didn't move. The gunshots seemed to ricochet, and he'd always been a pretty good shot with a hunting rifle. The creature turned around very slowly to look at him, and that was when he saw the yellow beak and the hollow, soulless dark eyes that seemed to give off a red eye-shine. The creature began to hiss at Archie, like a snake, and then suddenly his whole body began to convulse, quiver and shake, almost as if he'd been hit by a lightning strike, and all of a sudden he collapsed on the ground and passed out, his whole world going black. It was after the very loud sounds of the gunshots that had been fired that the 2 boys sleeping up in the treehouse woke with quite a start. "Did you hear that?" asked Gabriel, looking at his brother earnestly. "I heard a gun being fired, I know I did. My ears are ringing. It was so loud." It was then that the 2 boys heard the voice. "Please help me! Help me! I've been shot! I'm in pain! Help me! Help me! Please help me!" Gabriel and Elijah looked at each other, their eyes growing round with disquiet. "I don't want to go out there," said Elijah, looking nervously at his brother. "Something doesn't feel right." "But someone might be hurt," Gabriel insisted. "What if they've been shot by a poacher or something and they're bleeding out and about to die?" "But we don't have poachers around here," said Elijah. "Think about it. Dad's never mentioned a problem with poachers before." "Well, there's a first time for everything, isn't there?" said Gabriel. "I'm going to go out there and to see what's going on. I heard that shot. Someone could be hurt." Please don't go, Gabriel," said Elijah. Something doesn't feel right. I'm telling you, something's very off here.
It was then that they heard the voice again, that was even more earnest this time.
Please, help me! Help me! I've been shot! Help me! Help me!
The voice had now got Gabriel's undivided attention. He just had to go out onto the wraparound porch of the treehouse and flash his torchlight around. It would be easy to see if someone needed their help. Gabriel slipped the key in the lock and opened the door. It swung open effortlessly, and he was met with the cruel, unapologetic gasps of icy cold air that seemed to blast through the treehouse unapologetically, with a very determined force. The cool breeze beat against his cheek. It was very cold out there, Gabriel thought. The temperature had really plummeted overnight, and it was hard to believe it was not the middle of winter. It was so dark as Gabriel stepped out onto the porch, flashing the bright torch across the forest floor, to see if he could see anything. And that was when Gabriel saw it. His eyes opened wide in horror.
Help me!
Cried the creature, looking directly at Gabriel. He appeared to be nursing his arm, as if he had a wound.
I've been shot! Help me!
Gabriel looked at the creature, and a memory began to seep in his recall. Hadn't he seen this creature before somewhere? It looked familiar, but for the life of him he couldn't understand why.
Go away!
He cried.
Go away!
He was about to retreat back into the treehouse, when the light of the torch seemed to cast its glare over a lump lying across the forest floor, and Gabriel realized to his astonishment it was his Uncle Archie. Oh my God! Had this hideous thing killed his uncle, he wondered. He wanted to scream, run over to his uncle to help him. But if this thing had hurt Uncle Archie, it might hurt him too.
Help me!
Came the voice, as the eyes looked up at him in earnest.
Please help me!
All of a sudden, out of the dark shadows, Gabriel could see a gargantuan-sized form, moving purposely through the trees, stopping short about 4 feet away from the treehouse. In that moment, Gabriel's torchlight washed across the big lofty creature that was standing there, and he was wondering what on earth it could possibly be. For a moment Gabriel had abandoned his fear, rather like a kid for a moment, letting go of a balloon and allowing it to float away in the wind. In a trice, Gabriel could feel his knees almost wobbling beneath him, as if he was being jolted around on a boat at sea by a tempestuous wind current.
It can't be! It just can't be! I'm looking at a Bigfoot! No! It can't be!
Were the only thoughts that cluttered around his head. Was Bigfoot real? Well, he was certainly looking at one. Gabriel and his brother Elijah had loved watching stories about Bigfoot. Something about the creature had always inspired their intrigue and curiosity. They had wanted to believe with all their hearts that maybe Bigfoot did exist somewhere in the forests of North America. But here on their front doorstep, it was almost impossible to comprehend that this was happening right now, and he was looking at a Bigfoot. Gabriel had asked his father once,
Dad, do you think Bigfoot is real? I've watched a program on television about Bigfoot, and some people claim to have seen him. There was a couple in Alaska. They said they saw a Bigfoot watching them from behind the tree, and then it just vanished before their eyes.
His father had raised a scathing eyebrow and shaken his head.
Honestly, Gabriel, you're very easily duped, it would seem. I wonder what the couple were taking when they made this fictitious claim. They were probably high on magic mushrooms, or had drunk way too much. In Alaska, you know, they have a major problem with alcohol and drugs, so my guess is they were hallucinating at the time. Bigfoot is part of North American folklore, and there's nothing more to it.
When Gabriel had asked his mother the exact same question, the response he'd got had been completely different. She had stopped short for a moment to consider his question, and then said to Gabriel,
You know, son, that's a very good question that I'd like the answer to myself. Let's just say there are more things on heaven and earth.
But what do you mean by that?
Gabriel had asked her.
Well, I don't know, Gabriel, his mother had said candidly. This planet of ours is enormously large. So much of it is still uncharted wilderness, you know.
What does that mean? Gabriel asked.
Well, what I'm saying, love, is that much of our planet is unexplored. There are remote parts of the world that few men have even visited. So there's no reason at all why a creature like Bigfoot could not exist. I mean, in the oceans and on the earth itself, scientists continue to find new species that they didn't even know existed. It would be presumptuous of me to say Bigfoot is not real, because there is so much we do not know about our planet.
Gabriel's mother's words had filled him with hope, because he liked the idea of this elusive humanoid creature living in the forests of North America. But not for a moment did he ever believe that Bigfoot could really be real, until now. He flashed a torch wondrously over the Bigfoot, forgetting for a moment about the grotesque grey creature that had been crying out to him for help. The Bigfoot's gaze was fixed on the creature, and the expression in his human-like face looked exceedingly annoyed. The Bigfoot was 10 foot tall. He was definitely all male, with powerful shoulders, overlong arms, and an enormous stature. He looked as if he was built to be as strong as a piece of farming machinery. The creature, who hadn't appeared to notice the Bigfoot, was still looking up at Gabriel with wide eyes, begging him for help.
"Please help me!" it cried out. "I've been shot! Help me!"
The next thing Gabriel knew was the Bigfoot, who looked incensed, very, very angry, pounded on the ground and moved towards the grey creature, and his voice boomed indignantly. He shouted out some words that Gabriel couldn't understand.
Fancy, halani wala, mansaqwishana, halino.
And the grey creature suddenly turned around, and then he let out a long, shrill, terrified scream. There was absolutely no doubt in Gabriel's mind that the powerful presence of the Bigfoot had terrified this grotesque grey creature, who tried desperately to escape the Bigfoot's grasp. But the Bigfoot grabbed the creature, throwing him violently onto the ground, and then he jumped on the creature, stamping him down, until the creature became as flat as the ground itself beneath the Bigfoot's feet. The Bigfoot, now sensing it was being watched by a pair of curious eyes, looked up to meet Gabriel's gaze, and for a brief moment their eyes appeared to lock, and then he heard a voice in his head saying,
"Good evening, young man."
And with that the Bigfoot turned around and glided straight back into the woods and was gone. Gabriel hurriedly dashed down the treehouse's spiralling staircase with a frantic urgency, and when he got to the bottom, he ran over to his Uncle Archie's crumpled-up form, wondering if his uncle was possibly dead. For a brief moment he feared the very worst, for as he turned his Uncle Archie around, he was lying flat on his back, his face so desperately white that Gabriel was certain he had to be dead. Gabriel began to slap his uncle on the face very hard, tears spilling down his cheeks, for he loved Uncle Archie very much, and he knew that that horrible grey creature with the walnut face had killed Uncle Archie. All of a sudden one of Uncle Archie's eyes popped open, and then the other opened. He sat up with a start, and Gabriel cried out, "Oh, Uncle Archie, you're alive! You're alive! I thought you were dead!"
"But of course I'm alive,"
said Uncle Archie, sitting up and looking around himself in confusion, as if he couldn't quite comprehend what he was doing on the forest floor like this, in the middle of the night, with his skin burning from the cold, and his face stinging from being hit so hard by his nephew.
"What's going on here?"
he asked, looking bemused. Suddenly his eyes seemed to light up with the memory of what had just transpired.
"Where the hell is that grey thing?"
he asked, suddenly rising up to his feet and grabbing his rifle nervously. He was looking towards the treehouse.
"That thing, that vile thing, attacked me with an electric frequency. What the hell was it?"
Gabriel quickly grabbed his uncle by the hand and pointed to the flattened form lying on the floor. It was so flat it looked like a very large cardboard cutout. But Uncle Archie, walking over to it, recognized what it was at once. He poked the deceased corpse with the end of his rifle.
"How the hell did this happen?"
he asked, looking at Gabriel with a discombobulated look. "Uncle Archie, that thing was calling us, asking us to help it."
"Well, I know all about that," said Uncle Archie. "I heard it myself, so I approached it cautiously, and when I saw it, I fired shots at it. The thing turned around and hissed at me, and when it did, it emitted a powerful disabling electric charge of some kind and knocked me out."
"Me and Elijah woke up when we heard the gunshots, Uncle Archie. They were very loud. We were scared stiff after we heard the gunshots. And then we heard the creature calling for help, saying it had been shot. I had to see what was going on. I thought someone was wandering around in the woods and being shot by a poacher or something. I didn't want to leave the safety of the treehouse, but I couldn't ignore someone's cries for help, could I? Elijah refused to come out of the treehouse. He was too affrighted. He said something felt terribly wrong, and he'd rather wait for the morning before we ventured out of the treehouse."
"Good on Elijah," said Uncle Archie approvingly. "He was listening to his gut instincts."
"Something was also telling me not to leave the treehouse, Uncle Archie, but I couldn't help myself, could I? I thought someone was really badly hurt. When I came out of the treehouse, the thing was calling for me to help it, claiming it had been shot. But I knew when I saw it that it was a trickster. That was when I noticed you, Uncle Archie, lying on the ground in a crumpled heap. I thought you were dead, Uncle Archie. I was so terrified. I was sure the thing calling for help had killed you. And then that was when I knew the thing was very, very evil. But luckily, I saw that thing coming to our rescue. I couldn't believe it, Uncle Archie."
"You saw what?" asked Uncle Archie.
"The Bigfoot. I saw the Bigfoot."
"You saw a Bigfoot?" asked Uncle Archie, looking confounded.
"I saw a Bigfoot, Uncle Archie. He was huge," said Gabriel, raising his arms to emphasize the size of the thing. "It had very long arms. It was covered in long flowing dark hair, but I could see by its expression it wasn't happy with that grey creature. And when I saw it, it just ran towards the creature and began stamping it into the ground until it had flattened it completely, almost as if pulverizing a snail with a boot. I wasn't scared, you know, Uncle Archie. I was just shocked by what I was seeing. When the Bigfoot had killed the creature, he looked up at me, Uncle Archie. He nodded his head and said, 'Good evening, young man,' and then he glided away just like that. Can you believe it? He acted as if what had happened was no big deal, as if he'd just exterminated a cockroach or something."
"Good Lord,"
said Uncle Archie, staring down at the flattened creature with horror.
"I wonder what the hell this thing was."
"I've no idea, Uncle Archie, but I'm going to call it the Kookula."
"Why are you going to call it that?" asked Uncle Archie.
"Because the creature makes a tweeting sound like a cuckoo. That's why." All of a sudden a little head peered out of the treehouse and was flashing a torch around the ground. It was Elijah. "Is everything all right?" he called out nervously.
"Everything's just fine, Elijah. It's Uncle Archie here. I'm sorry I woke you up by firing those shots."
"And the voice? What about the voice? The voice asking for help? Who was it?"
"It was nothing, Elijah," called out Uncle Archie. "Everything is absolutely fine. I was just checking up on the both of you. I thought I saw something. I fired some shots. I didn't mean to wake you boys up like that, to disturb your sleep." "Look, son," said Uncle Archie, lowering his voice. "Don't tell your brother about the horrible, horrible thing we saw. I don't want him having nightmares. The less he knows about what happened, the better." The following morning, when Uncle Archie managed to get his sister Gretchen on her own, he told her what had happened the previous night, and when he began to describe the strange creature he'd seen crying out for help, Gretchen gasped. "Is that what you really saw?" she asked. "I don't believe it. The kids saw that same creature a year ago. It was asking them for help, and Gabriel and Elijah were so terrified by the thing. They were climbing their favourite tree at the time, where the treehouse is now, and the thing was staring up at them, asking for help. Both of the boys just didn't know what to do. They instinctively did not trust this thing, I'm very glad to say. They began to throw down broken twigs at it, but the creature kept asking for help. It didn't seem to be bothered by anything. They described it as having the face shape of a walnut and suction cups at the end of its fingers and toes. Gabriel told me that he remembered a sermon being preached at church, and the pastor saying you could make evil go away by commanding it to go in the name of Jesus, and so he decided to do just that, not believing for a single second that doing this would actually work. But believe it or not, Archie, when he called out the name of Jesus Christ, the thing began to tweet frantically, and it let out a shrill scream as if it was in desperate pain, and then it just vanished just like that. The children were horrified by the experience. They dashed back home as quickly as they could. You should have seen their faces, Archie. I've never seen anything like it in my life. They were absolutely haunted. They were as white as sheets, and I knew something quite terrible had happened.
Good Lord! Why didn't you tell me about any of this, Gretchen? I might have been less enthusiastic about encouraging the children to sleep in the treehouse overnight, if I had been aware of this story.
Well, I didn't want to say anything. People would think I was losing my mind, would they not? I mean, when the kids told me this story and what they'd seen, I was extremely worried. We'd only just moved to the countryside, and I wanted our children to have the kind of life that you and I both experienced when we stayed with Aunt Jane in the Pacific Northwest all those years ago. I was desperately afraid that after their outlandish encounter with this strange creature, that they'd never want to go and play outdoors ever again. But the very next morning, they acted as if nothing had happened. It was like they had completely forgotten everything. When I asked them about the strange creature they had encountered, they didn't seem to have any memory of it. It certainly made me feel as if I was going completely doodle-alley, and as if I'd made the whole thing up myself. But I assure you I did not.
Good Lord! They forgot their encounter, did they? I mean, how does that happen?
Well, they forgot it. It was like they had amnesia of some kind.
Well, my guess it's one of two things. Maybe they genuinely had amnesia. Post-traumatic stress can do strange things to people, to their minds, especially when they try to block out a frightful event. So that could have happened. Or the next thing that might have happened is that this strange creature, whatever it was able to wash their minds of any memories, so it could prey on them again. That's also a distinct possibility.
Well, I'm not complaining, am I? I was actually relieved, Archie, let me tell you, because Gabriel and Elijah were exploring the countryside again, which is exactly what I wanted for them. Of course, I told Thomas about the strange idiosyncratic event. But alas, she said, rolling her eyes, you know my husband, Thomas. He is, bless his heart, a forever cynic.
He didn't believe you, did he?
Said Archie, raising a bushy brow.
Why does that not surprise me?
Of course he didn't believe a word of it, said Gretchen, with a light laugh. You can lead a horse to water, can't you, Archie? But you can't make it drink. He didn't believe a word of it.
Well, at least you don't have to worry about this thing coming back to torment the children, said Archie. It seems like the Bigfoot squashed the life out of the thing. I'll show you the corpse if you like. Take you in the wood grove, so you can see this thing was very real.
This I would like to see, said Gretchen. But I still can't get my head around the fact that a Bigfoot killed the thing, flattening it into the ground like squashing an insect under its feet. And then it just looked up at Gabriel so nonchalantly, speaking telepathically to him, saying good evening, and then just walking away. It seems such an incredulous story, don't you think?
There was no doubt the incident that had happened in the woods on the night the kids had slept in the treehouse that Uncle Archie had built for them had left Gretchen wondering what the creature was that had called to her children for help. There was something so insidiously calculating and grotesquely evil about the creature that Gretchen was sure came from hell itself. Life continued as normal, chugging along cheerfully at its own leisurely, carefree pace, like one of those old-fashioned steam trains that happily whistles as it stops from one station to the next. One day, as Gretchen's children were playing in the woods and were lightly hanging around in the treehouse again, listening to their favourite music, Gretchen was wiping down some of the smear marks on one of the floor-to-ceiling windows with a glass cleaner when she observed a Rolls-Royce driving up the driveway towards the house. The magnificent car gleamed in the morning sun and looked distinctly out of place in the countryside. A very well-groomed elderly woman climbed out of the car. She was elegantly attired in a long tartan skirt, white blouse, cashmere sweater, and a string of pearls around her neck. She was wearing a sensible pair of blue court shoes on her feet. The woman stared up at Gretchen's house with a look of horror on her face. She could see the woman was moving her lips, almost as if to express her extreme distaste at the house itself. Who on earth is she, wondered Gretchen, her curiosity now aroused. She immediately discarded her glass cleaning cloth and sashayed over to the front door. Moments later she was walking towards the woman, who was still standing outside her Rolls-Royce, staring up at the house as if lost in a trance.
"Hello there," she said warmly, approaching the woman. "Can I help you? You're not lost by any chance? It's so very easy to get lost in these parts. Believe me, I know. I can give you directions if you like, if you need to get somewhere. I tend to know the place pretty well these days. We've been living in this house for over 2 years now, I think it is." "Oh, no, I don't need directions," said the woman, pulling off her leather gloves from her long, slender fingers and slipping them very discreetly into the handbag on her shoulder. "I am not lost at all, but in a way I wish I was," she said, her pale blue eyes catching Gretchen's gaze. "If you must know, my husband and daughter owned this house at one point. I was passing by this place and thought I'd take a look because I never got to see it, you know. I do hope it's not a dreadful inconvenience to you." "No, not at all. You're welcome to look at the property if you like. I can take you on a tour of the inside. May I ask you what you think of the house? You don't have to spare my feelings. People tend to have big reactions to this place, I'm afraid. Not all of them are good. You really want to know what I think about this house of yours?" the woman asked, her piercing blue eyes once again meeting Gretchen's gaze. Gretchen nodded. "I can see you're a woman of great style and taste, so I would appreciate your opinion." "Well, I think it's absolutely frightful, if you must know. Very vulgar. But then again, I would never expect anything less from Dylan Kalposki. So I can't say I'm remotely surprised by this," she said as she pointed towards the house. "That man had I shouldn't say has no taste. The only good thing he's ever attained in his life is my daughter, you know. But what my misguided daughter sees in the man, God only knows." The woman looked at Gretchen and said, "You know you wish the best for your children, do you not?" "You sure do," Gretchen agreed. "I have 2 kids myself, so I know where you're coming from." "Well, you can guide your children in life to a certain degree, I suppose," said the woman. "Give them some kind of direction. But you can't dictate any of their choices, can you? Not when they're old enough to make those choices themselves." "So I take it that this Dylan Kalposki you're talking about is your son-in-law. Is that what you're saying?" said Gretchen. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Dylan Kalposki I never liked from the moment I met him. He's cold, hard, calculating and indifferent, just like the glass and steel on this property." "Oh dear," said Gretchen sympathetically. "It can't be easy when you don't like the person your daughter chooses to marry. Does she know you don't like her husband by any chance?" "Absolutely not. There are some things you don't share. But at least my daughter and her husband love each other. He treats her right, you know. So I suppose I shouldn't be complaining. It could be a whole lot worse, could it not?" "Well, I suppose at the end of the day that's all that matters. Why did Dylan Kalposki build this house, if I may be so bold as to ask? Because the estate agent told us that the original owners were from Atlanta. So why did they move here in the first place?" "Well, my daughter and her husband have always been city dwellers, you know. But her husband is able to work wherever he wants. He's got one of those versatile jobs, if you know what I mean. My daughter always wanted to live close to Yellowstone National Park. So my son-in-law buys this land and builds her a property.
which he describes as dreamlike for her. He wanted it to be a surprise for her, of course, and she was so very excited about it. But when they drove up the driveway to the house for the very first time, she nearly passed out from shock.
She did? Asked Gretchen.
Are you telling me your daughter didn't like the property either? Good Lord, no. She absolutely loathed it, said the old lady. Absolutely abhorred it. She couldn't believe her husband would build such an eyesore like this in the countryside. She thought it was the most unromantic house she'd ever seen in her life. My daughter is much more of a traditionalist like that. She enjoys classic architecture, but her husband likes everything very avant-garde, you know. She pretended she liked the house, of course, because she didn't want to offend her husband. I, of course, told her she should have been honest with him from the very word go. But my daughter's got such a good heart on her, you know. She'd never dream of offending her husband. When she told me about this house, I thought she was exaggerating about how characterless it was. But she was not, was she? Well, if it makes you feel any better, Sorry, I didn't get your name. Oh, dear, it's me that should apologise. My name is Nina Forrester, and you are? I'm Gretchen Passmore. Sorry, Gretchen. You were saying before I so rudely interrupted you. I was just saying that when I first laid eyes on this house myself, I thought it was hard, cold even, much like your daughter did. But I've got used to the place over the last year or so, well, the last couple of years, actually. But how can you ever get used to such a soulless place, my dear? Asked Nina. Don't you feel as if you're living in a goldfish bowl? As if the entire world is looking in on you? I mean, you can see every room in the entire house. Where is your privacy? That's what I'd like to know. I did feel very self-conscious in the beginning, Gretchen admitted with a chuckle. But I guess you can get used to anything. Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee? And I can show you around the house if you like. If you can bear to see it, of course. Well, that would be awfully kind of you, Gretchen. I'd be very obliged.
It was after Nina Forrester had drunk another cup of coffee with Gretchen that Gretchen asked the question she was burning to ask.
I hope it's not too nosy of me to ask you this, Nina, but why did your daughter and her husband up and leave so suddenly, after 6 months? Did they really hate the house so very much? Or was life in the countryside just too much for them? The estate agents seemed to think that that was the problem.
Nina Forrester's teacup rattled a little.
I'm worried, dear, if I answer that question of yours, you won't believe a word of it. My daughter's story is out there, you know. I struggle to believe it myself, but she swears it happened.
Try me, said Gretchen. I think you'll find I've got quite an open mind, when it comes to the paradoxical, you could say.
Well, let's just say my daughter fell pregnant in this house. And early on in her pregnancy, she was taking a nap in her bedroom. She heard a tapping sound in the window. She pressed the control to pull back the curtains, and she said there was this hideous grey creature sticking to the glass pane, as if it had suction cups attached to its feet and fingers. It was looking in at her with these red, evil-looking eyes. It was calling to her, saying, "Where is the little one? Where is the little one?" And my daughter knew at once the creature was referring to the baby that she was carrying. She was so frightened, she drew the curtain and hid herself in the wardrobe. And when her husband got home, he didn't believe a word of what she told him. But when he saw the smear marks on the outside window and all the green slime that could not be explained, that was when they both decided to sell up and move away at once. I told my daughter that maybe she'd had a very bad dream of sorts. But let's just say wild horses would not bring my daughter back to this place. She really had quite a scare by that thing she claims to have seen. Do you believe her? Asked Gretchen. Oh, absolutely, said the old woman. My daughter does not make up stories. I believe her too, said Gretchen, taking a reflectful sip of her tea, and realizing that this grey creature that Nina Forrester's daughter had encountered, and that her children had encountered, was a predator, clearly with an interest in dining on the flesh of children and babies. To date, her son Gabriel still calls the creature he saw the Kookula. Gretchen and her family still live in the house of steel and glass,
and Uncle Archie occasionally visits the family. To date, they have seen no more of these Kookulas. And as for the elusive Bigfoot that courteously said goodbye to her son Gabriel, they haven't seen him either. So there you are. That's my story.
Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.